Most people look at their environment and assume it is the source of their struggle, but what truly limits them is not what they are facing, it is how they interpret it. Circumstances are neutral until meaning is assigned to them, and that meaning is shaped by belief. Two people can face the same obstacle and produce completely different outcomes, not because the situation is different, but because their internal framework is different. The mind decides first, and reality follows its instructions. Beliefs operate like internal boundaries that define what feels possible and what feels forbidden. When someone believes they are disadvantaged, unlucky, or behind, that belief quietly restricts their willingness to try. They begin to avoid opportunities that challenge that identity, not consciously, but instinctively. Over time, avoidance becomes habit, and habit becomes evidence that reinforces the original belief. Circumstances change constantly, but beliefs remain unless intentionally challenged. This is why some people stay stuck even when their situation improves. A new opportunity appears, but the old belief interprets it as a threat rather than a gift. Instead of growth, the mind looks for safety, and safety often looks like staying the same. The most powerful limitations are the ones that sound reasonable. Beliefs like this is just how life works, or people like me don't get those chances feel logical, not restrictive. Because they feel logical, they rarely get questioned. Logic without awareness becomes a cage, convincing people they are being realistic when they are actually being restrained. When beliefs are limiting, effort becomes exhausting. A person may work harder, longer, and with more discipline, yet see little progress. This happens because the mind resists outcomes that conflict with identity. Subconsciously, it will slow momentum, create doubt, and manufacture distractions to protect what feels familiar, even if what feels familiar is painful. Circumstances only have power when belief gives them authority. A setback becomes permanent only when it is interpreted as a verdict instead of feedback. Failure does not stop progress, but believing that failure defines you will. The belief turns a temporary event into a permanent identity, and identity dictates behavior. Many beliefs are inherited rather than chosen. They are absorbed from family, culture, past experiences, and repeated conversations. Over time, these borrowed ideas become internal rules that feel personal, even though they were never examined. Living by unexamined beliefs means allowing someone else's limitations to design your future. Beliefs also determine tolerance levels. When someone believes struggle is normal for them, they tolerate situations others would reject. They accept less pay, less respect, and less opportunity, not because it is all that exists, but because it aligns with what they believe they deserve. Tolerance quietly becomes destiny. Expansion begins when belief is confronted, not when circumstances change. The moment someone challenges a limiting belief, new options become visible. The same environment suddenly offers different possibilities because perception has shifted. Opportunity often appears only after belief allows it to be seen. True freedom is not the absence of obstacles, but the absence of limiting beliefs. When belief changes, circumstances lose their power to define the future. What once looked like a wall becomes a doorway, and what once felt impossible begins to feel inevitable. Invisible beliefs control daily decisions, expand it, and don't add any ending sentence and make it lengthy in 10 paragraphs without heading and conclusion. Invisible beliefs operate beneath conscious awareness, quietly shaping choices long before logic gets involved. Most decisions are not made in the moment they appear. They are pre-decided by internal rules formed over years of repetition and emotional experience. These rules determine what feels safe, what feels risky, and what feels completely out of reach, guiding behavior without ever announcing themselves. Every day is filled with small decisions that seem insignificant, yet they are governed by deep assumptions. Whether someone speaks up in a meeting, applies for an opportunity, or walks away from a conversation is often decided by what they believe about their own value. These beliefs do not shout commands. They subtly influence instincts, creating automatic responses that feel natural and unquestionable. Invisible beliefs shape what people notice and what they ignore. The mind filters reality to protect existing beliefs, highlighting information that confirms them and dismissing anything that challenges them. When someone believes success is rare or reserved for others, They unconsciously overlook evidence that growth is possible, even when it appears directly in front of them. These hidden beliefs also control emotional reactions. A delay can trigger patience in one person and panic in another, depending on what they believe about time, worth, and opportunity. Emotions are not random. They are signals generated by belief systems interpreting events. What feels like overreaction is often a belief defending itself. Fear is rarely about the action itself. It is about what the action would mean to identity. An invisible belief might say that rejection equals failure or that being seen equals being judged. To protect identity, the mind steers decisions toward comfort and familiarity, even when discomfort is the doorway to growth. Invisible beliefs influence habits more than motivation ever could. Motivation comes and goes, but beliefs remain constant, guiding behavior even when energy is low. This is why people can be highly motivated, yet consistently choose actions that keep them stuck. The belief decides the direction, and motivation merely fuels it. Many invisible beliefs were formed during moments of vulnerability, when emotion was high and understanding was low. A single experience can plant a rule that governs behavior for decades. Over time, this rule becomes invisible because it feels like truth rather than interpretation, shaping decisions without being questioned. These beliefs also dictate boundaries. They determine what someone says yes to and what they never even consider. Opportunities are not rejected outright. They are filtered out before conscious thought can engage. The decision feels like intuition, but it is often belief masquerading as instinct. Change becomes difficult when invisible beliefs remain unexamined. New strategies and tools fail because the underlying beliefs quietly resist them. The mind seeks consistency, and any action that threatens an old belief triggers hesitation, delay, or distraction as a form of self-protection. Awareness is the first disruption to invisible control. The moment a belief is brought into consciousness, it begins to lose its authority. What once dictated decisions in silence starts to face scrutiny, and choice begins to replace automation. You never outgrow what you believe you deserve. Expand it. And don't add any ending sentence and make it lengthy in 10 paragraphs without heading in conclusion. People. Often chase growth by adding skills, strategies, and information, yet remain confined to the same level of results because self-worth has not expanded. What a person believes they deserve becomes the invisible limit on what they will allow into their life. Even when opportunity appears, the mind evaluates it through the lens of deserving, accepting, or rejecting it based on internal permission rather than external availability. Deserving is not about entitlement, it is about expectation. When someone expects little from life, they subconsciously negotiate themselves down in every area. They ask for less, settle faster, and compromise more often. This does not come from lack of ambition, but from a belief that more is for someone else, someone more qualified, more confident, or more fortunate. Beliefs about deserving shape identity. Identity then dictates behavior. A person who believes they deserve struggle will work hard but tolerate unnecessary difficulty. They may overextend themselves, undercharge for their value, or stay in environments that drain them, not because they enjoy it, but because it aligns with their internal story of who they are. Many people sabotage success right after they achieve it because it conflicts with their sense of deserving. When results exceed identity, discomfort appears. The mind looks for ways to restore balance by creating chaos, delaying progress, or making poor decisions. This is not self-destruction. It is self-consistency enforcing an outdated belief. Deserving beliefs influence how people receive. Compliments, support, and opportunities are either embraced or deflected depending on what feels appropriate internally. When someone believes they do not deserve ease, they resist help and overvalue struggle. Hardship becomes a badge of honor rather than a signal for change. Financial ceilings are often self-imposed through D's. Irving beliefs. Income rarely surpasses what someone feels worthy of managing. When money challenges identity, it creates anxiety instead of freedom. Without an expanded sense of deserving, wealth feels unsafe, and the mind finds ways to push it away. Relationships are also filtered through deserving. People accept the level of respect they believe matches their worth. When self-worth is low, boundaries feel uncomfortable, and self-advocacy feels selfish. As a result, unhealthy dynamics are normalized not because better options don't exist, but because they feel unfamiliar. Deserving is shaped by past experiences, not present potential. Old failures, criticism, and unmet expectations leave imprints that quietly dictate what someone thinks they are allowed to have. Without intentional reflection, yesterday's pain becomes today's limit, controlling future choices without permission. Growth requires recalibrating deserving before expanding results. When self-worth is upgraded, behavior naturally follows. Decisions become bolder, standards rise, and tolerance for misalignment decreases. The external world begins to respond differently because internal expectations have changed. You never outgrow what you believe you deserve because growth requires internal permission. Until that permission is granted, every new level will feel temporary, unstable, or undeserved, pulling you back to what feels familiar rather than what is possible. Effort without belief alignment creates resistance. Expand it and don't add any ending sentence and make it lengthy in 10 paragraphs without heading and conclusion. Many people pride themselves on how hard they work, yet quietly feel frustrated by how little seems to change. They push themselves, stay busy, and exhaust their energy, believing effort alone should produce results. When progress stalls despite consistent action, the real issue is rarely effort. It is misalignment between what they are doing and what they truly believe is possible for them. When beliefs contradict goals, the mind creates resistance as a form of self-protection. A person may say they want success, growth, or change, but if their belief system is anchored in fear, unworthiness, or doubt, every action toward that goal feels heavy. Procrastination, hesitation, and second guessing are not signs of laziness. They are signals of internal conflict. Resistance often shows up as overthinking. The individual spends more time planning than executing, convincing themselves they are being careful or strategic. In reality, the mind is delaying action to avoid confronting a belief that says failure is dangerous or visibility is unsafe. The body obeys belief before intention. Effort without belief alignment leads to burnout because energy is being used to fight the self instead of move forward. The person pushes against an invisible brake while pressing the accelerator. This internal friction drains motivation and turns progress into a constant struggle rather than a flow. People in this state often feel stuck in cycles of starting and stopping. They begin with enthusiasm, then lose momentum without understanding why. The initial excitement comes from desire, but sustaining action requires belief. Without belief, discipline feels like punishment instead of empowerment. Misaligned effort can also create inconsistent results. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't, and there is no clear pattern. This inconsistency reinforces doubt, strengthening the very beliefs that cause the resistance. The person then works even harder, believing the answer is more effort instead of deeper alignment. Belief alignment determines how the mind interprets setbacks. When belief supports the goal, obstacles are seen as feedback. When belief contradicts the goal, obstacles are seen as confirmation of limitation. The same challenge either fuels growth or strengthens resistance depending on belief. Resistance is not an enemy, it is information. It points directly to the belief that needs to be examined. Wherever action feels forced or draining, there is likely a belief saying the outcome is unsafe, undeserved, or unrealistic. Ignoring this message leads to repeated frustration. True momentum begins when belief and behavior move in the same direction. When someone believes growth is possible and deserved, effort feels lighter and more consistent. Action becomes an expression of identity rather than a battle against it. Until belief aligns with intention, effort will continue to produce friction instead of freedom. Hard work will feel like pushing uphill, not because the goal is wrong, but because the belief system has not yet caught up with the direction of desire. Growth demands releasing old identity and thinking expand it and don't add any ending sentence and make it lengthy in 10 paragraphs without heading and conclusion. Growth is not about adding more to who you are. It is about letting go of who you have been. Every level of progress requires the release of an identity that once felt safe, but is now too small. The habits, thoughts and self-definitions that helped you survive one season can quietly sabotage your ability to expand into the next. Old identity is comfortable because it is familiar. Even when it produces frustration, it offers predictability. The mind prefers what it knows over what it does not, so it clings to outdated self-images long after they stop serving growth. This attachment makes change feel threatening, not because growth is harmful, but because it challenges the version of self the mind is trying to protect. Thinking patterns are deeply connected to identity. The way you interpret changes, success, and failure is filtered through who you believe you are. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, every obstacle reinforces that narrative. New opportunities then feel like accidents rather than evidence of transformation. Growth often feels uncomfortable because it creates an identity gap. Your actions begin to exceed your self-image, and this mismatch produces tension. The mind responds by trying to pull behavior back into alignment with the old identity, creating self-doubt, hesitation, or guilt for wanting more. Letting go of old thinking means questioning assumptions that once felt unquestionable. Beliefs about limitation, timing, and worth must be challenged, even when they have been repeated for years. What once felt like wisdom may now be nothing more than a habit of thought. People often mistake loyalty to their past for authenticity. They believe changing their mindset means betraying where they came from. In reality, growth honors the past by building upon it, not by being confined by it. Clinging to old identity does not preserve integrity, it preserves stagnation. New levels demand new standards. As identity evolves, tolerance for misalignment decreases. Situations, conversations, and behaviors that once felt acceptable begin to feel heavy. This discomfort is not loss. It is evidence that the internal structure is shifting. Resistance to growth often appears as nostalgia. The mind romanticizes earlier versions of self because they feel simpler and less demanding. This longing can pull someone backward, convincing them that comfort is preferable to expansion, even when comfort no longer brings fulfillment. Releasing old identity requires courage because it removes excuses. Once you stop seeing yourself as limited, you can no longer hide behind those limitations. Responsibility increases as belief expands, and with it comes the pressure to act in alignment with the new self-image. True growth happens when identity catches up to potential. When old thinking is released, action becomes more natural and aligned. The future opens not because circumstances change, but because the self has changed enough to receive what was always possible. Action is the fastest way to upgrade belief. Expand it and don't add any ending sentence and make it lengthy in 10 paragraphs without heading and conclusion. Belief does not change through intention alone, it changes through experience. The mind is convinced by evidence, and action is the fastest way to create that evidence. Waiting to feel confident before moving forward keeps belief trapped in theory, while action turns possibility into something tangible and real. Most people assume belief must come first, but belief is often the result, not the cause. Confidence grows after movement, not before it. When someone acts despite uncertainty, the brain begins to update its internal model of what is possible, slowly replacing doubt with proof. Action interrupts old mental patterns. The moment movement begins, the mind is forced out of imagination and into reality. Fear loses some of its power when confronted, and the exaggerated risks created by overthinking are replaced by real, manageable feedback. Small actions are especially powerful because they feel safe enough to attempt while still challenging old beliefs. Each small win chips away at the story that says change is impossible. Over time, these wins accumulate, creating a new internal narrative based on lived experience rather than assumption. Belief strengthens through consistency, not intensity. One bold move may inspire, but repeated, aligned action reprograms identity. When behavior becomes habitual, belief adapts to match it. The mind eventually accepts what the body repeatedly proves. Action also poses false beliefs. Many limitations collapse the moment they are tested. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable, and what once seemed impossible reveals itself as unfamiliar rather than unattainable. Action turns imagined barriers into measurable challenges. Taking action shifts focus from outcome to process. Instead of obsessing over success or failure, attention moves to execution and improvement. This shift reduces pressure and allows belief to evolve naturally through engagement rather than expectation. Belief upgraded through action is resilient. It is not dependent on motivation or mood because it is grounded in memory and skill. When confidence is built through experience, it remains available even during uncertainty or setbacks. Action creates momentum, and momentum reinforces belief. Each step forward makes the next step feel more accessible. The mind begins to expect progress instead of resistance, and this expectation shapes future decisions. The fastest way to change what you believe is to behave as if a higher belief is already true. When action leads, belief follows, transforming identity through evidence rather than affirmation.